Okay, it's not gonna work. So, um, thanks for organizing this. Um, this is an alternative title that I have. I will rethink human security with you by emphasizing how framing matters. Um, so I will be talking about the case of Kurdish issue in Turkey specifically, but let me begin with the human security notion. Um, First of all, what is human security and how do we define human security? There are many different ways to do it. There are narrow definitions in the literature. There is a broader application in the discourse. But basically, human security concept was introduced by the international agencies. It became an international discussion in 1990s, and especially after the Cold War years. Now we do have more ethnic conflicts, more environmental problems, more risks, and they're specifically responding to new downside risks that could affect everyone. And the United Nations Development Program defined human security in 1994 as both quote, safety from such chronic threats such as hunger, disease, and repression, and protection from sudden and hurtful disruption in the patterns of daily life. Although the actual term human security was first used by United Nations, its origins can be traced back to the UN commissions on the environment, development, and the global governance. And we know that Clinton administration used this concept in many different foreign policy speeches in early 1990s. And even earlier, we know that the Helsinki Accords of 1975 linked state security to individual human rights. As I said, there is a narrow definition in international security discourse when there is a failed state and there is a risk of genocide or some other ethnic cleansing. Definitely we need to, as the international society, we need to be involved. And this is a kind of narrow definition because these are the crisis moments that everyone apparently see the risk of life and so forth. But new definitions even include unstable financial markets as the human, as under the umbrella of human security. So again, I'm not going to go into these debates, which one is better, narrow or broader definition of human security. But the point is, the stress on human security was meant to be a counterweight to the view that the only form of security that mattered was the state security, defined quite narrowly as military defense of state interests and territory. So this is the discourse itself. Against the Cold War notion of the state security or against the Machiavellian understanding of politics. So human security's main focus is the people as opposed to states. And that is, there is a moral dimension of the discourse. And human security's principal goal is to extend the concept of security beyond national security as one way to force states to pay more attention to the needs of their citizens. So in that sense, the choice of the term security is meant to persuade governments that citizens' security is the state's security. And if citizens are insecure, then the states are insecure too. So in that sense, the discourse emerged as also as a normative discourse. And I would like to come to my specific case today because I would like to move beyond the abstract conceptual discussions, but try to be specific about my approach to the social cultural reforms when there is an ethnic conflict. And in that sense, let's look at the case of the Kurdish issue in Turkey. If you're aware of the recent phase of the Kurdish conflict in Turkey, the government explicitly talked to negotiating with the terrorist organization, the PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party. And there is a big, of course, there is a big debate in Turkey, and it's very similar to, well, the UK's negotiation with IRA and that kind of processes. Because they are explicitly recognized as a terrorist group by the United States, by Turkey, of course, for a long time, and many European countries. And this interaction between the terrorist group, the PKK, or I would call militant group, because as an academic, terrorism is a political term. So let's say militant group, armed revolutionary group, okay? And for 3 decades, they start attacking to Turkish government and military in 1984. And in 3 decades, let's look at the toll. More than 40,000 people dead. About 20,000 people are kidnapped or missed. Or we don't know about these people. These are missed people, very similar to Argentina and some Latin America, and Spain as well. We had the dirty war years in 1990s in Turkey. And we don't know what happened. State security, counterterrorism forces also involved this dirty war. And of course, it made the issue much more complicated for Kurds in the region. Because the roots of the Kurdish issue is going back to Turkey's republican, one nation and one citizenship notion of the ethno-nationalism going back to about a century ago. So my question is, we can talk about the Kurdish issues specifics if you have questions. Since I would like to move forward to my points, my question here is straightforward. Does introducing pro-Kurdish reforms solve this problem? Solve this ethnic conflict in Turkey? So more democracy, more reforms, less ethnic tension. Is it the case? This is a question that could be comparatively thinking, because we know that there are some reforms work in some societies when there are armed groups and revolutionary groups. Now, if you have more reforms, yes, it works. And in some other cases, in comparative political science and comparative sociology works telling us that it work. So we don't know a clear answer in the literature. But the conventional perspective would be looking at the root causes of these type of conflicts. Okay, what are the root causes of an ethnic conflict? It could be poverty, it could be inequality, it could be oppression, right? So let's make reforms. Let's address these root causes so that we would have less tension and we would be solving the problem. But there is something going on, something else going on in ethnic conflicts. We have more burden because there is an increasing mistrust, there is an increasing prejudice, there is an increasing discrimination, and there is an increasing dehumanization in the process. And we know that in Turkey, for example, in the past decade, we have more and more reforms. But we also know that the social ties among Turks and Kurds are also increasingly strained, and it's becoming of two different society that could not understand each other in what we call intractable ethnic conflict. So these processes are going on at the same time. So if we have our human security discourse, but assume that this is happening in a domestic way in Turkey, government would take this approach, this normative approach. If we would like to solve this problem, we can benefit from the conflict formation perspective in the literature. Conflict transformation means that we need to see a real change, parties' interests and goals, their self-definition. So new perspectives. And today I will be specifically looking at framing this literature in social sciences. Frames are the ways, the lenses that we see the world. We interpret the world and we interpret the processes. So we do also interpret the social cultural reforms, through our social lenses. And it is very important for governments to solve a conflict, and not only governments, but the parties involved in conflict, to understand how framing works in this issue, in this particular issue of social and cultural reform. And if you look at the ethnic conflicts and ethnic identity, in bitter ethnic conflicts, interests are shaped by images that in turn are partially shaped by identities. And you can think about this circle, interests, ethnic identities, and images. And these images are very important. And again, framing is right here very clear to us. Identity, we identity as developed over time, and images, and dehumanization. And you do have this process of cultural reforms and maybe political reforms, maybe economic reforms, but you do also have these processes of we construction and other construction at the same time. And you need to understand that it is very linked. These two processes are very, very linked to one another. So the question here would, again, go back to our question, would social cultural reforms break this chain? This is, of course, a big question mark, and I would say it's not always the case, and certainly in the past decade, Turkey having more and more reforms in Kurdish issue, but the government is failing to frame the issue in the best way possible. And PK, what is the, let's say, you do have, okay, you might think IRA, you might think some other, some other cases in your mind, but think an armed revolutionary group and that terrorist group, when that happens, that these processes of reforms happening, how they would frame this, how they would get in touch with Kurds, with these people. What do they tell about the social cultural reforms? And they are telling to the people, to Kurds, that their violence, indeed their violent attacks, are bringing these reforms because their war, their freedom fight made these things available to the Kurds, to these groups, right? So recognition of Kurdish identity in the past decade, before it was not recognized, it's only 10 years ago, after 1999, this process of European Union, Turkey recognized Kurds for the first time. And, PKK violence is PKK is telling Kurds that it is recognized because of their war, their fight, and so forth, other reforms. And if we go to the alternative frames, of course, there are many competing frames in Turkish discourse, the discourses among Turkish and Kurdish polity. One discourse is Turkish nationalist discourse, who are criticizing government, and they're telling that weak government, the failure of the government, indeed brought these reforms. And of course, they're talking to Turkish constituency specifically, and criticizing the government and criticizing the government for its negotiation. Another competing frame would be the government's pragmatic approach, the AKP's, the party in power, not sincere, but making these steps to gain power and votes and so forth, but not sincere for Kurdish identity. And of course, it hurts. This discourse is specifically hurting the process of social cultural reforms, because if this prevails, Kurds would not welcome these reforms as something useful for their future. Another competing frame happening is the democratization of Turkey frame. It worked, especially the years, I will come to that slide, you will see, in the past decade, for 2 or 3 years, it was very clear in government's agenda, especially the years when the government had the European Union negotiation process happening. And that frame, democratization frame, was really linked with the European Union membership course. And it was, this was telling people that there will be a new Turkey, and that Turkey will be more democratic Turkey, more inclusive Turkey, and it's good for Turks and Kurds. And it's going to be, it's going to also help opening the European Union membership doors for the country. So this is also a competing frame. And how it worked, the initial years, European Union reforms, for a few years, these initial steps taken and these reforms happened. And after these reforms, especially the years after the government came to, the ruling party came to power in 2002, in 2 years, they had radical reforms. Civilian rule, they eliminated the martial law in the region. It was a big step, and so forth. And then we saw that in these years of democratization frame were really powerful until the election 2007. It was a clear victory of the government, and it was more than the pro-Kurdish party. The government got votes, favorable votes from the Kurdish constituency. But later on, government clearly reject the European Union, not reject, but they clearly become disengaged with the European Union discourse, clearly. And they didn't take any steps. But this drop of the democratization discourse also hurt their steps, because they had more maybe radical reforms. I didn't put here, but 2009, they had the first official Kurdish TV, Turkey. They launched this TV station. Maybe the most radical reform, but it didn't get the same impact because of the framing of the issue, because it was not the again, not the democratization anymore, not the European Union membership anymore, but something else, and maybe mixed messages in Kurdish constituency. They don't know why they're taking these steps, they're sincere or not. And of course, after these negotiation process, now it's happening. What is coming next? It's not an easy answer, but I have some conclusions. Sorry. What is telling us in terms of, we did look at one case, it might be good to look at these normative issues like human security discourse in a radical way that could go beyond the Machiavellian understanding. What is the moral logic? What is the normativity here? Human is the most important element, and their freedom and their identities. If it's an ethnic conflict, definitely ethnic identity recognition and legitimacy and their cultural rights, right? So if you have this moral logic, violence shouldn't matter. If there is violence or not, the government should take these steps to ensure its own citizens having the equal food, right? Violence shouldn't matter, and recognition of ethnic identities and equality and justice should be always the framework for us. This is the moral logic telling us, not the Machiavellian logic, right? And if you have this approach, ethnic minority rights shouldn't be negotiated, right? So it's not a gift. If you are taking these steps, it's not a gift. And it should be clear in your message. And that's what I'm telling to you from a Machiavellian logic. It's the same thing. Here we do see a compatibility of strategy and morality. So in that sense, okay, if you have these explicit frame these lenses and these discourses, democratization, Turkey, and these citizenships and recognition of human dignity, you can win the game. So this is also telling the compatibility, which is indeed, which would be a radical shift, because we always assuming that these moral logic and morality and normativity that we have, especially in human security discourses, are not really helping strategically, helping us, especially in these type of bitter ethnic conflicts. So I don't want to take too much time here, but I would appreciate if you have some questions, because again, I don't feel that I can give the background of the Kurdish issue in Turkey. But if you're interested, then we can talk about it. Thank you.